Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast. I'm your host, Dan, from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. This episode is brought to you by PCBWay, but more about that later, because right now I've got a very special guest, Paul, from either Paul's Projects or Smart B Designs, whichever one you know him as. How are you, Paul?
Yeah, doing well. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I typically ask my guests how they want to be addressed, but it's been a while since a guest episode, so this is why I kind of stumbled through that.
No, it's fine. Paul's fine. Paul's Project's the YouTube channel name, and then Smart Beat Designs is the website. I probably should make those a little more coherent or whatever, but
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that when I went to your web store, which we're going to talk about in a moment, and then I Googled Smart Bee Design, or actually I searched Smart Bee Design on YouTube, it was all beekeeper stuff. So that's the only thing that's not really overlapping.
yeah, the whole naming thing kind of backfired on me a little bit because it's one of those things when you're trying to start a business, you're trying to think of a name for it, and so like I didn't have any ideas, and I was looking through just like random logos, just trying to get some inspiration, and I came across like a little bee. I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought, well, like my little boards, I guess they're like little worker bees, so then I just kind of ran with that. But then, yeah, I've had the same thing where like I've tried to like search my own stuff on like an incognito mode or whatever. And I get a lot of beekeeper stuff. And I'm like, dang it. That's maybe it
Yeah.
wasn't the smartest idea, but oh well.
I mean, you're talking to a guy who called himself Simple Electronics. So you just Google Simple Electronics, and all you get is a bunch of really smart Indian people making simple circuits,
Yeah.
and not me.
Oh, that's funny.
So we kind of put the bee before the honeycomb here. Can you
Yeah.
just let the listeners know who you are and what you do in a nutshell?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Paul, and I'm a maker, and I kind of do more of the hardware, electronic design aspect of it. And some of my stuff that I make, I put up for sale because some people want to buy it. And that's kind of the gist of it. And then I have a YouTube channel, even though I wouldn't really consider myself a YouTuber, but I'll put some content up or stream some of my designs and stuff like that.
In typical maker fashion, though, you sold yourself short. I think some of
No.
your designs are amazing. And
Well, thank you.
actually, we can get started with the one that kind of sent me to your channel in the first place, which is the tiny ESP32.
Yeah.
Now, before you get started on this, I need to paint a little bit of a word picture for
Hmm.
our listeners. Um, this thing is like the size of a thumbnail. And like, I don't mean like a YouTube thumbnail. I mean like literally the nail on your thumb. Can you talk to us a little bit about this project?
Yeah. So when I'm designing stuff, usually I have like a purpose for it. But in this case, I was just having a thought like, I don't know if you've ever seen like the Adafruit Cutie Pie boards or the Seed Studio. They all kind of make like a similar footprint, ESP32 or other microcontrollers, and they're pretty small. They're probably like the size of your actual thumb. And I was looking at them, and I was thinking to myself, I think you could probably make that smaller. And so, just on a whim, I thought, well, I'll see how small I can possibly make, an ESP32, and that's kind of how the project started.
So it's an ESP32 chip without
Hmm.
the sort of the steel anti EMI shield,
Yeah, it's just the bare chip.
and it's sitting on a board about the size of the EMI shield, and it has no antenna. It's got
Hmm.
one GPIO, and you did you flubbed it a little bit, right? The RGB LED doesn't work.
Yeah. The video that I put up was the second version of it. The first version was slightly bigger, and I couldn't get it to work because I had an issue with the way I had the schematic laid out. And so when I decided to go even smaller, long story short, I put the RGB LED on the back, but when I did that, KiCad had flipped or mirrored the footprints so like the pins weren't in the right orientation. So unfortunately that didn't work, but for the third version, it should be working.
When is the third version sort of gonna drop? When are we gonna see that?
Hopefully in the next month or two. It's like anything in life, especially as makers, you build a project and then you get distracted and you're doing something else, and then that one kind of sits on the shelf a little bit. So I've already done most of the design on it. I just have to get the stuff ordered, and I had to make a few tweaks here and there.
Sounds good. And so what? So basically, my opinion is that an ESP32 doesn't really need a lot of GPIOs because you can sort of use like a web page as an access to it. You can do all your inputs in code, but
Hmm.
what about yours that doesn't have an antenna? What kind of useful stuff can you make an ESP32 with one GPIO do?
That's a good question. I don't really know. Like I said, it was just kind of like a test case to see like how small can I make this. And the funny thing is like when I designed it, I thought not that I say it was perfect, but I'm like, this feels like this is pretty good. And then as soon as I made the video from the community, it's amazing the amount of feedback you can get, and a lot of it was positive, but in a ton of great ideas that got the wheels turning. Where I was like, oh yeah, I think I could do this differently or whatever, and get more GPIO on there. And so in that aspect, I think the third version will be much better.
Well, that's going to be pretty good then. And so,
Mhm.
what kind of features are we going to see on the third version, or is that too spoilery?
No, no, no. It's not too spoiling. So one of the things that I quickly learned is that everybody wants Wi-Fi, obviously, because one of the things I had to forego to make it so small was, like you mentioned, get rid of a Wi-Fi antenna. But yeah, so I should be able to get Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to work on the new version, and at least 2 GPIO breakout pins. I've got some interesting ideas on how to make all that work.
I guess with two GPIOs, you should be able to do sort of software communications like SDA and SCL stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. I squared C for sure.
Oh, there we go. It's I squared C. Wow, brain
No,
fart.
no. That's all right. I know what you meant.
Yes, that's cool. So it's more. I mean, it's more of a let's see if I can do it thing than a practical
Oh,
product.
yeah, 100%.
But yet, it's like I think it's your most popular. Oh no, your most popular electronics related video is. Oh no, it is. Yeah, it is for
Yeah,
sure.
electronic, yeah, for sure. Not the most views on the channel per se, but for electronics, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, what's up with your YouTube video? Because your YouTube channel. Because I see if we go into the past, you've got a video from like 11 years ago,
Yeah.
and
My YouTube channel is very much a hodgepodge of different making stuff. I guess that's part of like being part of being a maker, I suppose, is um like I do a lot of electronic stuff, but I also have done a lot of woodworking and things like that. So I think my most popular video is probably when I built our dining room table.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
So you made a walnut trestle table,
Hmm.
and if I'm not mistaken, that was like quite the trend on YouTube. I don't know if you were sort of before or after the trend started, but yeah, woodworking like those two-legged for people who don't know, it's like two wide legs on each side, and then there's a board across the like vertically across them, and that was
Yeah.
like very popular.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you still like use this table?
Yeah, it's still sitting in our dining room.
There we go, and you got 600,000 views on that. So at least at my RPM, you probably paid for the wood.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's what I was telling my wife. I was like, at least it's paid for itself at this point.
But yeah, the tiny ESP32 is your most viewed video, and that's the way I found you, which is still mind-boggling to me that YouTube knows that I watch electronics related channels. They know that I'm always looking up ESP32 stuff because I don't know how to code, and yet it didn't think to give me your channel until you made this ESP32 video.
That is weird how the the algorithm works like that. Like you'll see people that are extremely popular. Like I've never heard of this person before.
It's weird, yeah. Like, for example, like I'm friends with BitLooney now. I don't know if you know who BitLooney is,
Yeah, yeah.
but I only found out about him through I think it was another maker that had sent me his video on the ping pong wall, and I'm like, this is right up my alley. YouTube knows nothing about me.
Yeah, what gives?
Yeah, stupid YouTube. But so from that, I went to your store, and you're saying right now you're out of stock, right? But what do you usually sell on your store?
So mainly it's just ESP32 development boards. I have three kind of main popular ones, I suppose. I have kind of just a cheap do-it-all kind of ESP32. It's low powered, called the BS3. And then I have what I call the B Motion S3. It's an ESP32 board with a built-in motion sensor, PIR. And then my latest one is a data logger board, and it has built-in SD card slot and a built-in real-time clock and a host of other features.
So what are the advantages of your ESP32s compared to sort of like the mass market AliExpress boards you can find?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's mainly just the design concepts and trying to make them as energy efficient as possible. So for instance, on the B data logger and the B Motion S3, there's two LDOs, which are low voltage dropout regulators, and basically gives you extra headroom to plug in like external sensors or motors or whatever without worrying about browning out the ESP32. And it's a lot of just like, it's one of those things where like, if there was a mass market data logger board that you could get for $10 off AliExpress, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But anytime I looked it up, a lot of times when I build this stuff, I'm trying to build stuff that I want to use myself. And so first I'll just look to see, hey, is there something already on the market that I could just buy? And if I can't find exactly what I'm looking for, then I'll just build it myself. And that's kind of where it stems from. And then in the process of doing that, since I stream on YouTube and I have like a small following, some people are like, hey, I'd like to buy that. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to sell, 10,000 of them, but I might sell a few. So that's just kind of where it stems from.
Do you have any examples of what you use let's say like the data logger for, to give our listeners a little bit of an idea of what they could use it for?
Yeah. So I've done some weird stuff with that thing. One of the things that I actually wanted to do, and it seems really dumb in hindsight, but I wanted to be able to data log a whole bunch of environmental data as I was driving to work. And I have like a fairly long commute. So I got a GPS module and typical sensors like light sensors and air quality sensors and things like that. And so I was able to attach them to my B data logger, which automatically kept the real time and saved it to the SD card. And then I drove, all over the place, and it tracked all this data. Then I can overlay that onto like Google Earth, so I can see all the points along the way of like, how was the air quality here, or how much UV light was I getting? Just kind of playing around, but that was one of the things I did with it.
That's really cool. I've for a long time now, I've wanted to log temperature data in the house because I live in a house from the 70s and the insulation quality is pretty garbage. And up here in Canada, it gets really cold in the winter and really hot in the summer. So I've always just wondered what the temperature deltas would be at any given time. And it's hard to pin that down because when the air conditioning runs, it sort of like squishes the data together, right? Because the rooms cool down to almost the same temperature in the summer. And then they'll like, by the time that the thermostat kicks back on, the rooms have drifted so far off from each other. So I'm not sure where in the cycle I'm grabbing data. So it'd be really nice to have some like long-term data. So that's one of the sort of ESP32 projects that are coming in the pipes at some point. But yeah, something like your data logger has already sort of the whole basics done for everything. So it's a little bit easier in that case.
Yeah. And I also have Stemma QT connectors on them too. So plugging in like an Adafruit or SparkFun sensor, is super easy on them. You can even like daisy chain them together.
Yeah. So yeah, because the QC they talk in between each other, right? So you can daisy chain, and they all take the same.
Yeah, they're all like the I2C. So as long as they don't have the same I2C address, you can almost. I don't know. There may be some actual limit, but I don't know what it is. But it has to be quite a few.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. And sadly, you told me before the episode that you're completely out of stock. So, I think people should still go take a look. It's
at the very least, if you go to like my Tendy store and I think even the Electron store, you can sign up on a wait list, and that at least gives me a rough idea of how many people may be interested in. So when I build them, I'll know how many to make.
That makes a lot of sense. But it's smartbdesigns.com for those listening. And I will put the link in the description of the podcast or the show notes, depending on what platform you guys are listening to. Go take a look because they're kind of all there to look at. And also, Paul's links will be in the upper corner to his GitHub, Discord, Twitter. I guess it still have a bird logo, so it's still Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So guys, check that out.
Basically all the links.
So that brings us to another point, though, that you say when you build them. Now, I've watched Sion build, the Unexpected Maker build ESP32s, and he has a pick and place machine. And lo and behold, I go browse your channel, and you also have a pick and place machine. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what the machine meant for your business and how you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. To paint a picture for people, the world that Sion is in, as far as pick and places, and where I am at, is worlds apart. But when I first started making the BS3, which is like the cheapest one I sell, I think I'd made like 30 of them or something, because like I don't know how many people are going to buy these things, and they sold out like instantly, and I was like, oh, okay. And then the wait list grew, and it got up to like 500, people, or 500 quantity of people wanted those. I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to place them by hand very fast. So I started researching, and at that point, I was like, I think I'm going to have to invest in a pick and place machine, and so that's what kind of led me down that road. It's a small like desktop one. It's the Neodin YY1 that just came out like last year, I think.
But like, it's okay. So it's a small desktop thing, but this couldn't have been cheap. It does look like a commercial piece of hardware.
Yeah, it's not dirt cheap for sure. It cost basically $3,500, I think.
That is more reasonable than I would have assumed, actually.
Yeah.
Because Sion had churned through like 2 machines. He had like nightmares with one of them. Has this one been so far so good?
It's had its issues, like not to the level that Sion had. Like it works, but it's had some minor issues show up. Like I'm trying to think. Like when it arrived, one of the brackets that held one of the stepper motors was bent. I don't know how it got bent in shipping, but they sent a replacement for that. The way this thing works is it has like a little needle that shoots down into the tape reels and advances them. So a little needle comes down in the little holes in the tape reel and advances it in one spot, and then it comes over and picks it up. Well, at some point that needle stopped being kind of consistent, like it wouldn't fire half the time, and that's kind of important. You need the tape to advance to be able to pick up more parts. But they sent a replacement for that. So it's had some minor issues here and there, but for the most part, while you got all the quirks worked out, it seems to work okay.
And so how many, if you were to guess, how many boards have you run through it so far? Because I see that you've had it for like
Almost
a year and a half. Oh, okay.
I think I got it in October of last year, if I'm not mistaken. So just a little bit over a year, yeah.
So
how many boards? Probably. That's a good question. I don't know if I actually know.
Just if you were to, if you were to
Ballpark it.
guess, and do you think it's paid for itself in this 1 year span?
Yeah, it's paid for itself, just barely, probably. But I think I've probably over 1,000 boards on it, probably.
Oh wow! And so,
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, the pick and place machine literally only does what it says. It picks up the parts from the parts reel, as Paul is explaining, and it puts them on the PCB at the right spot, hopefully. And then that's it. So you have to do your own solder pasting, and you have to do your own reflowing, like the heating part, right?
Yep, correct. Yep.
So
yeah, it just does what it says in the name, and that's it.
It's like $3,500 for just one part of the process. Mind you, one of the more tedious parts for a human.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just in time savings alone, it's worth it. Especially when you're doing like any kind of production run where you don't want to be bent over, hand placing, thousands of components. It saves a ton of time.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Do you have some sort of automated oven as well for the reflow, or do you use like a hot plate?
I have a hot plate, but mainly I use all it is a toaster oven, and then speaking of Sion, he sells a what's it called?
The Reflow
Master
Master.
Pro. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I have that hooked up to it, and it works pretty well.
Well, there we go. We can plug Xeon at the same time just because
Yeah,
you're making stuff.
he's getting a lot of mentions in this episode.
Yeah, but because that's the other thing is I was already subscribed to Xeon, and I had him on the podcast, and before and after his interview on the podcast, I had looked up stuff about pick and place, ESP custom designs, and still your channel didn't come up. This is upsetting to me.
Well, at that point, I probably wasn't streaming yet, if I had to guess, because that was probably a couple years ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, it might have been a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
I still
that's
blame
okay.
YouTube.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
In the pre-show, you mentioned that you wanted to talk to me about Linux, and I got a little scared because people get very into their Linux. But you assured me it's not that. So what are we chatting about here?
Nothing bad, nothing bad. Well, I was listening to your last episode, and I apologize, I don't remember the fellow's name that you were talking to.
Gadget Reboot.
Yeah, Gadget Reboot, and you guys were talking about different operating systems and using Linux and all that stuff, and you had mentioned maybe wanting to try Linux, but there's a lot of hurdles with it. Have you ever heard about Windows WSL?
I have not actually.
I'm going to blow your mind. I'm like an evangelist for WSL. So what WSL is, it literally stands for Windows Subsystem for Linux, I believe. And on Windows 10 and Windows 11, you can literally install Windows or Linux, and it runs in a terminal. Now, it's not the GUI Linux, but it is full-blown Linux. But you don't have to do a dual boot or anything like that. You can literally just open up basically the terminal, and you have full access to Linux. Where that's useful, where I use it all the time, is if you're building like CircuitPython firmware or MicroPython firmware for like an ESP32, all that stuff's basically done in Linux. And so I just pop open these WSL terminal in Windows, and then I can build this firmware. And then you can literally, if you wanted to edit in VS Code on your Windows side, you can literally just type in the WSL terminal, I think it's code and space, then a period, and hit enter, and it'll open up whatever directory you're in VS Code. So it's one of those things like if you wanted to just play around with Linux, it's super easy to install and work with. And if you hate it, you can just uninstall it. You're not having to mess with any partitions or anything like that.
That's very interesting. I will tell you that that the terminal stuff scares me, and that Linux I would basically use as a desktop replacement. So I would need the GUI stuff because I'm basically code illiterate. I mean, as much as I try, I end up just sort of hacking together example code and then making my own. Although the latest code I've been working on, I sent it to someone who does code, and they said it looks good. So, patting myself on the back for that one.
Can't be doing too bad then.
Yeah. But I mean, the terminal stuff, like the command line stuff is sort of way beyond my understanding. Like I was telling you before the interview that when I go onto Sion's live streams, what he's doing is just, it's just magic. I have no idea what's going on. And even the other day, BitLooney was dealing with some ESP32 settings in something that looked like command line, but it wasn't. And I'm like, I don't even I use the Arduino IDE. I have no idea what's going on here. So
right. Yeah, I can understand it. It can definitely be intimidating. It's not as difficult as it seems, I guess you could say. But like I said, I'm not like a Linux aficionado. I don't know all the ins and outs. But it's one of those things where it's super useful if you had to do something in Linux for whatever reason. Like for instance, I basically only use it to build CircuitPython and MicroPython firmwares for some of my boards. But being able to just pop open a Windows terminal and mess around in it, and then you can close it and you're done. It's pretty awesome.
So just to show you the level of basic I am, could you explain to me why you would need to make your own custom firmware for your boards? Whereas, if you just grab the ESP32 online, doesn't it come with a basic firmware?
Yeah. So basically, any ESP32 like that, you could just plug in and use Arduino, which is fair enough. I support that too on all my products. But CircuitPython and MicroPython, it's basically what it sounds like. It's like it's not full blown Python code, but it's like a subset of Python that you can run on ESP32s and some other microcontroller boards. Adafruit are the ones that run Circuit Python. What makes it kind of interesting and cool, at least with Circuit Python, is like when you plug your board in, it literally pops up as like a USB drive and it shows your code file right there. And then you can just edit it in any text editor. And when you hit save, it just immediately starts running on your ESP32, so you don't have to compile it or anything. So, not saying that everybody needs to do that, but it's one of those things where like I like to support as many languages as I can for the different boards that I make and sell. And so those are one of the things that I do.
Gotcha. So your board, I mean, Sion told me this too about his boards, is that you plug it in and, you know, there's a text file that appears and you just edit it. So your boards work exactly like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's pretty neat. Do you know of any good place to get like either CircuitPython or MicroPython, like just reference documentation? Because when I code in Arduino, I always have the arduino.cc/reference open on the side. And whenever I ask someone about the, you know, MicroPython documentation, they're just like, yeah, but it's just Python. But then I found out it isn't. Like there's something like spaces are very important and they're different in MicroPython or something. I'm not sure. Do you have any like go-to places you go to?
So basically, like, I mean, I will say it's probably not as well documented as Arduino is, like the way you're describing it. But like Adafruit on their basically anything they sell that supports CircuitPython, they have like a learn section where you can click on it and it'll show you all the different types of code. But if you go to like circuitpython.org, there's a bunch of documentation there.
Yeah, I tried. So here's the deal. My wife is actually she's getting pretty decent at code. She's not like she wouldn't consider herself a wizard or anything. And when she was asking about like what I do on my YouTube channel and stuff like that, I gave her an Adafruit board. I think it was I don't know. It's one of the circular ones, the Circuit Playground Express or something like that.
I know what you're talking about.
So I gave her this, and I said, just go on adafruit.com. It's a Circuit Playground Express, and you know I want you to code, you know, something with the LEDs around it. And she got frustrated because she couldn't find her way around the site to use CircuitPython. Like it's not obvious to newbies where to go to get the information on how to get started. And she ended up downloading a very basic IDE, which was fine, but it didn't have like a lot of the nice features on like VS Code. And she got it working finally, but she said it was a really frustrating experience. And so I felt validated because I bought that board last year and I haven't made a video on it yet because I found the experience so daunting compared to the Arduino experience, right? So I really wish... Go ahead.
I will say I will agree with you on the IDE front. Like the CircuitPython, like with Arduino, I should say, like it's real easy. You just click, you know, serial monitor, and then it'll spit out whatever, you know, it's super intuitive and easy. In CircuitPython, yeah, you have to have like, you know, I think it's like called Thony or I forget what the IDE is called. But yeah, it's not very intuitive to set up, which is kind of a shame because the actual coding side of it is generally pretty easy, but at least for new people, I suppose. Yeah.
So do you have some sort of tutorial type thing for using your boards, or because it's pretty much just edit the file, that's you're just expecting people to get it done?
What do you mean? On my GitHub for all my boards, I have documentation on, you know, all the different programming languages and a bunch of example code you can play around with.
Gotcha. So I could just buy your board, you know, copy paste the code onto that file, and then it'll run something.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't think the Circuit Playground Express did that. The Adafruit board, you had to go through. There was like this weird like menu on the left, and you had to like, you know, hit the drop downs and stuff to figure out something to put onto your board. And then if you go to the tutorial section or the project section, your board sometimes didn't have the peripherals or the external devices that the project was sharing. So like, I don't know, it wasn't a good experience. I'm really glad that you took the time and made documentation for the people who buy your boards, because I think that's the most frustrating thing when you get a new toy and then you can't get it working. Just a quick interruption to talk about this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and I think they're a good match for my channel because they provide quality PCBs for a reasonable price. You can get boards manufactured up to 100 mils by 100 mils for just $5, including shipping to Canada, $15 US, including shipping to USA, $12 US, which is incredibly cheap for professionally manufactured PCBs. I can personally attest to the quality of these PCBs, and so if you want a circuit immortalized forever, check out PCBWay.com with the link in the description. Now back to the conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree on that front, and that's one reason why I've tried to document stuff as much as possible. Like even like I just sent you a link, but like the example code that I have for my IP data logger, I try to make as many different example sketches, even if it's what I might consider to be simple, like, you know, turning on the RGB LED. If a new user is coming along and they don't know how that works, I think even just supplying just the simple sketch can help get people going in the right direction.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and it's well laid out. It has nice comments. So I'm just reading one of the RGB LED sample codes. I think it's called solid colors, and then you have comments, common color RGB values. Then you've got green is 0, 150, 0, red is 150, 0, 0. So this is exactly what someone like me needs to get going. So I'm really glad that you put the time into the documentation. I've had quite a few coders on the podcast, and they always comment. They always say that that documentation is lacking on on hardware and on software projects. So I'm really glad your GitHub looks pretty good. I'm going to link it into the show notes for the people to check out too, because it's probably useful for boards that aren't yours as well, I guess, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool stuff. So yeah, that's pretty neat. But let's go even further into documentation, because you were talking to me about a project you're working on, and I think that could benefit quite a few people. So what are you working on?
Yeah, so I have been working on a pet project for a little while. It's basically a online database. It's not every single microcontroller development board that's ever been made, at least not at this point. I'm still adding to it. But I want to have it be as expansive as possible. But in the short term, or I should say what it is right now, is you can go on there and type in the search bar any of your criteria. Like if you wanted to search for ESP32 cameras, and it'll instantly show you all the list of all the ESP32 cameras, and then you can compare them. You can select two and compare them side by side, their specs. You can click on one and it'll show you all the details of that board, give you synopsis. It'll point to all the documentation for that board, at least that I've been able to find. And the website's called DevBoardDB. And like I said, I'm still building it out. It's still kind of in a beta stage, but I hope it'll be a useful tool for some people.
Yeah, I now want to sell it a little bit more too. So first of all, the website is not cluttered, which is great. You get onto the main page and you don't have to navigate anywhere. Literally on the main page, there is all the microcontrollers, sort of like with large thumbnails, and they're already sorted A to Z. So right away, you could just do what I like, it's like visual browsing. So that's one of those things that I don't pay for TV at home. I use internet. But when I used to get free cable, the best part about it was that I could discover new things just by browsing.
Right, yeah.
And so this gives you sort of like an overview. You get a nice close-up photo of every single board on your website so far. And then you get the parametric search bar, which you can search anything. So as Paul mentioned, camera. But I typed in Mega 328 or AT Mega 328p, and it came up with the 3 boards that are on your website that have the AT Mega 328p. So in this case, it's a Arduino Uno, Rev 3, Arduino Nano, and the Beetle BLE. So that's actually really cool.
Yeah, you search by, basically almost any criteria for the most part. It's, the CPU type like you just did, the brand, if it has a certain feature you're looking for, like USB-C or camera or whatever. You can even change some of those things together, and it'll narrow it down. It's kind of like live filtering, I guess you could call it.
And it's very responsive. It works very quickly. I actually tried to, I tried to trick it. I just typed in Ethernet, but nope. We've got all the boards with Ethernet. So this thing works really well. Like, I can obviously see that there needs to be more added, but already,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because there's only.
It's probably about 90 in there right now.
Yeah, which, is like a fraction.
It sounds like a lot, but when you when you start like searching through them, you're like, oh, I'm already through them all. So it's one of those things where like I'm literally adding more every week. I'm just kind of working through it, and I'm fixing bugs and things like that, and adding different features and stuff. One feature in particular that I have working, it's not live yet, but it'll be coming here in the next couple of weeks, is a battery life calculator, so that you can figure out how long your project may last on battery. I think that'll be really useful for people. And another cool thing about it is not every board has the ability to run off a battery, so those are kind of irrelevant. But the ones that can, if I have the information, or if I can find the information on, what's this power draw in deep sleep, what is it power draw when it's awake, or with using Wi-Fi or any wireless connectivity, I can automatically plug that in, so the end user doesn't need to know that information. Because, for instance, like right now, if I, like one of my boards in particular, like I know that they run at a very low deep sleep current of around 20 microamps. And the reason I know that is because I have a power profiler kit. It's like a piece of hardware that you can plug your boards into and get an actual reading of how much power it's drawing. But normal people don't have access to that. And so if you don't know that information off the top of your head or know what it is, then you're not going to be able to figure out, oh yeah, this board waking up this often and staying awake for this long will last me, 120 days. Or so you can kind of, spec out the right size battery for a project if you're trying to make it a certain length of time, all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah, and I just tried searching for display. I didn't get anything, but then when I type in screen, it shows up. So there might be a couple keywords missing, but
yeah,
through the website just now, I learned that you can get an RP2040 with an LCD, which is, I didn't know that those came out yet. So there we go. Learn something new every day.
Awesome.
You also you have the specifications and the features. Is there like a comparison table? Like, can you click two and then compare the two?
Yeah. If you go back to like the main page or whatever, you see like the little check boxes in the left-hand corner.
Yep.
Of each one, you can select 2 random ones.
Oh, there we go.
And then hit compare, and it'll show you everything side by side. It'll show you where you can buy them. If you make a free account, like that, I'm not doing anything with that information other than it allows me to save, like if you want to make a wish list or if you want to make a collection of the boards you already own, you have that option too.
Oh, so you can sort of use it as an inventory system.
Yeah, exactly. I've been playing around with different stuff, especially like with the collections. I've got stats working on some stuff so I can, see how much your collection values, the total value of your collection. And then you can immediately hide that in the settings if you don't want to see that ever again.
There's like a
just
wife
another
button.
Random stats. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like see that once and turn that off forever. But and then just some other random stats. But
oh damn, I forgot where I was going with this. But yeah, this is a great idea for a website. So really glad that you have that. You just need to add a little bit more.
Yep.
Inventory over time, and then this is going to be perfect.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes, and it's one of those things like, I'd love for people to just check it out, and I have, you can report issues or ask for features, or if you want a specific board added, you can use the report button and do that.
What was the inspiration for making this? Because I mean, I'm trying to build. Well, I'm actively building one website, and I'm trying to build another. It's a lot of work. So, what was the
It is.
inspiration?
It was basically one of those things where, like, I don't know. I'm like, if you're on Reddit and any place that, these maker communities gather, like, there's always just a ton of questions about, like, which board should I use for this project, or, I can't find this documentation, or does anybody know where the schematic's at? And I've always thought, like, it'd be nice if that was all just kind of in one central place, a database, for instance, and then where people could just easily search stuff. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where I thought I'd just give it a go. I tend to like to tackle, like, least difficult for me challenges, and so trying to code this thing it's been it's been a big challenge, but it's also been a lot of fun.
For the user account controls, do you use user spice in the back end?
No,
Okay.
and basically the whole backend is with Google.
Oh, gotcha. Are you aware of user spice?
No, I'm not.
So user spice is I'm just gonna plug another maker's stuff now, but user spice is a friend of mine's open source project, basically, which simplifies all the like user account permissions and stuff like that. So if you ever wanted to get to a point where you have some accounts that you allow to submit boards and stuff like that, and control, who can do what with what,
Right.
apparently he was hired to code that so many times that he got frustrated, and he decided to just make an open source alternative so that he didn't have to code it every single time a client needed it. And I believe he's okay with me saying that at this point he gets so much work off of giving away user spice that the program has paid for itself multiple times over. So yeah, it's a cool piece of software. So anybody who's designing a website should look into it.
I just went to the website, and I actually think I do remember seeing this like a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's a powerful piece of software. He keeps wanting me to install it on my, on the server I host my website on, but it's just, I don't think I've got the brain power to deal with that right now.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's really cool. I'll definitely dig into that.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I think he still answers support tickets, which is crazy because it's a free piece of software, but I guess the thing is that a lot of professionals they implement it, and then they realize that the implementation that they need it for is way larger in scale than they understand to do, and then they just hire him to do the implementation.
That's smart, yeah. He's like, yeah, here you go, have fun, and then I'll be here waiting,
Yeah, something like that. And I know, like, he's so busy that he's not taking on all the jobs anymore. I don't even know if he's taking any jobs anymore, but yeah, he's a good guy. So I would recommend taking a look at that software for sure.
Awesome.
Now, another thing is that I'm incredibly envious of yet another machine you have in your possession. You built yourself a Voron 2.4.
Yes,
How
I
was
did.
that thing?
Love it. We talked briefly right before we started recording about it, and it's one of those, I've had several 3D printers over the years, a lot of bed slingers and stuff, and there's always, almost inevitably, there's some sort of issue, or you crash the head into the bed, or you can't get the thing level, and all those sorts of issues. But yeah, ever since I built this thing, it has been rock solid. I could let it sit for 2 months, and then if I need to randomly print something, I'll throw the STL over there, and it just takes off and goes.
So which route did you go for your Voron? Because there are a couple of options. Like, for example, you can buy a full kit on AliExpress. You could buy a full kit from an American supplier. You can buy just the structural parts. You can buy the printed parts. Which way did you go?
I did it the hard way. I pieced everything out.
Oh my
3D
God.
printed, 3D printed all the parts myself on one of my other crappy 3D printers. Yeah, that's the route I went. I tried to go the cheapest route possible. I don't know if that was ultimately the cheapest route, and I did this. I think we said like a year or 2 years ago.
Yep, you live streamed some of it, about 3.5 hours of it, and you said it was how many hours total?
I want to say it was like 8 hours total.
Yeah, that's gonna be a long one. Were you able to print ABS on your crappier machines to use the parts on your Voron, or did you go the route that some people are doing these days, is they're using sort of PETG, and their first prints are ABS, and you hope that the ABS parts get done before the hot end parts melt?
Yeah, I was able to print most of the ABS stuff. If I remember correctly, I think I printed like all the structural stuff in ABS to start, just to get the structure of the Voron printed, and then once it was up, then I printed all the rest of the ABS stuff on the Voron, like the side skirts and like the little window, I forget what they're called, anchor points or whatever.
And so no regrets then, huh?
No, not at all.
What's
Absolutely love it. In fact, it's to the point where like my other two printers, I think they're up in the attic right now. To be honest with you, I haven't even used them in forever.
What size did you go with? Because I'm tempted to go 350 by 350 by 350.
Mine is the 300 version, 300, 300, 300.
Yeah, that's the recommended one. But I mean, if you're see, to me in Canadian pesos, it's like $1,300 for 350 by 350 by 350, and it's like $1,200 for a 300. So I was like, man, for $100 extra, you get so much more size, right? Like overall volume.
Yeah. I will say though, like I have not ran into an issue where 300 has not been big enough, but I don't tend to print massive stuff, obviously. You know, most of the stuff I print is for like microcontrollers and things of that nature. So, but if you're printing bigger stuff, then it's probably worth it. Yeah.
I mean, so arguably you should probably went with a V0, like the little guy.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I wanted the big toy.
Yeah, me too. I want both, to be honest.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about a lot of freaking money in 3D printers. I already have 3 here, 2 of which that run constantly, and 1 of which that I need to upgrade.
What do you normally, what kind of stuff do you usually print?
So I have to preface this. This is not advice for anybody. Do not take advice from me. But I got, so my first machine, I decided to buy the cheapest one possible. So I got a Tronxy X3A. Again, would not recommend. However, with a little bit of tweaking, right now it's rock solid, which is great. It's my workhorse. Then I bought a secondhand Tronxy X5A. I paid less for the machine, which it's a what do you call that with the like the Voron style? Yeah, it's a Core XY. I paid less for that machine used than I could have bought the aluminum extrusions for, but it's a piece of shit. So I need to. I have a bunch of parts printed for it for an upgrade. So that's another story. And then a sponsor sent me a 3D printer. The company's called Shinwini, and they sent me a 3D printer. It worked like garbage, and after like 3 or 4 emails back and forth, they just stopped emailing me back. So it sat there collecting dust until randomly I saw someone that had a similar issue I was having, where the nozzle would leave like giant blobs in the print. And it turns out it was the power off recovery setting saving its progress after every layer, and wherever the nozzle finished, it paused there while it was saving to the SD card. And so it just blobbed. And so I turned that off, and then it started printing fine. So it printed fine for like 6 months. And then all of a sudden, it forgot it had a BL Touch, and it drove itself into the bed. So aside from that incident, it's been actually fairly good. But now the company doesn't even exist. I don't even know where they are. Like, you can't even find this thing anymore.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. SIENWINY, if people want to take a look at it. Physically, the printer is nice because it's still a bed slinger, but it's like I think it's 350 by 350 by 400. So it's kind of
a big one then.
Yeah, it's a big boy. And, it's got an all metal dual gear extruder. It has BL Touch. It has, touchscreen. It has all this stuff that's very cool, but it's just, it has this cheapness about it. Like they used an AC, 3-conductor wire for the heated bed connections, and so it's really thin. Like it's probably like, it says 18 gauge on it, but it looks more like 20 gauge to my eye. It looks small, You know, there's
Fire hazard
just
waiting to happen.
yeah, there's like these little things that I just really I wouldn't buy it. But yeah, they just stopped answering me, so I guess I just got a free 3D printer.
I guess you can't complain with that then, I suppose.
No, and I didn't want to put out the video because it's just going to be negative to them, and that's much worse than no video. So
I
there
guess
we
at this
go.
point you could almost just do like, I don't know, that story if the company doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, so it seems so. If I Google it, there's Shinwini Module Store and on AliExpress, but they're selling like RF modules and stuff. I don't know what's going on.
Huh,
So
that is weird.
it is what it is. But I do dream of a Voron. It's just it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I would have to sell, 2 out of my 3 machines here before I would buy a Voron kit. But the deal is that my original X3A is printing so well now that it's worth more to me than it is on the used market because it's kind of a piece of junk.
Mm-hmm.
And the Shinwini, I wouldn't feel comfortable selling to anyone because, like you said, like there's a couple like questionable things on it. And the X5A, I mean, it's very temperamental, so I wouldn't want to sell it and then have someone who's a beginner buy it and then half the time
Right.
wonder what they're doing wrong. So, at this point, it's like an adopted pet. I'm gonna keep it till it dies, and then we're gonna see what happens.
Reevaluate, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of where I was at. Like I had a couple of other 3D printers and they were just giving me issues at a certain point. I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna go all out and go for the Voron.
Which ones? Which ones did you have?
So the 2 ones that I've had recently, I should say recently, I had the longest was I had a Monoprice, what was it called? Maker Select Plus, I think.
Okay, is that the cantilevered arm one?
No, it's a bed slinger. I don't even know if they make them anymore. I've had it for probably 5 or 6 years, something like that. But it was a good little 3D printer. I think the build volume was like maybe 150 by 150 or 100 by 100. And I upgraded the crap out of that thing. Just changed out the heads and I changed it to a direct drive, or upgraded the direct drive. So yeah, that was kind of a workhorse for a long time. I printed a lot of stuff on that thing. And then I also had a G-Tech. I had one of those dual head extruder 3D printers.
Okay.
Yeah. And that worked okay, but I ended up not really printing that many multicolored things, so I didn't really use it that much. Or if I did use it, I was just using one head. And I'm like, well, this is kind of a waste. But yeah, those are the 2 main ones. And then I've got some resin 3D printers that I pretty much never use, but they're just sitting right there staring at me.
And so, what do you mainly print with your 3D printers? Because we didn't actually get into the meat and potatoes of like what you actually do on a daily basis.
It's a lot of, I make a lot, like my 3D printing is a lot of just practical stuff. So like I'll print cases or, mounting stuff. I'm trying to think of any examples. I honestly don't print a ton, but it is one of those things. It's awesome to have. That's what I was talking about. Like, I can let it sit for 2 months. Then if I randomly need to print something, I don't have to like, oh, I need to try and level this thing, or, it just takes off and goes. But yeah, it's mainly just practical stuff.
I just like 3D print everything. It's like been part of my life since I got them. It's like everything looks like a 3D printing challenge now. So actually, I wanted to ask you this at the top of the show, and we're kind of at the bottom of the show now. But what kind of background and education do you have? Because, I mean, clearly looking through your YouTube channel, looking through your store, and now talking with you, you seem like a pretty intelligent person. Like, what's your background like?
I appreciate that. So I don't have any formal education in like electronic engineering. Like a lot of makers, you just kind of learn as you go. But my main job, and the job I still do, is I work in the CNC and CMM industry. So I get to play around with. I mainly work with CMMs right now.
What's a CMM?
Yeah, CMM. It's a coordinate measuring machine. So basically, if you run a part on I assume you know what a CNC is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you run a part on a CNC, you need to be able to check the dimensions of that thing. And a lot of stuff you can check, with like micrometers or calipers and things like that. But there are a lot of features that you have to be able to check accurately with what we call CMM. And it's basically, I mean, you literally could just think of it as like a 3D printer. It's kind of the same concept, but it has a probe on the, instead of a print head, it has a probe. And you can come down and touch the part in different places, and it'll take that coordinate point in space, and then you can tie those points together to give you all sorts of dimensions, basically, and like parallelisms and concentricities and all sorts of stuff.
What kind of industry needs that kind of, because like you said, like old school machining, they usually just take out a micrometer and check that the rod is within spec or whatever. But yeah, this really does seem like a 3D, like so you can do a point cloud all over the part and reconstruct it in digitally. So what kind of
so the company I work for, we specialize in gearing, and so that's where a lot of that comes from. And so like it's not, you can take measurements on a gear with a pair of calipers, but it's not very accurate. And so if you need to get like micron level detail as far as like the slopes and the profiles and the helix angle and all this stuff, you have to have some sort of CMM capabilities.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So then you're not, the CNC machines you're dealing with, they're not 3-axis. They must be like 5-axis machines, right?
We do have a lot of 3, 4, and I think we have a couple 5-axis, yeah. But we do a lot of what's called gear grinding. And it's as simple as it sounds. You put a gear into this machine, and then it has a grinder, like it's not like not a disc grinder, but a special, I don't know the material type. It's a hardened wheel basically, and then you can cut different gear shapes into it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so is this like automotive use or aerospace?
We do a lot of energy stuff. So like we've made stuff for windmills. We made stuff for oh crap, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Tesla. We've made some Tesla stuff. All sorts of random things. Anything that uses a gear, basically, we've probably made parts for them.
That's awesome. I was walking around an industrial section of my town a couple years ago, and there was like I think it was just a machining shop or something. I don't remember the name of it, but it had one of its bay doors open, like a garage door.
Yeah.
And
summertime.
Yeah, summertime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I know what that's like.
Sitting there on like 4 pallets was like a propeller, like the width of the garage door, and not like a single car garage door. And so I realized at that moment that there's a little bit more fancy machining around me than I thought, because it looked like that propeller came out of like a solid block of like brass or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, machining is something I've been interested in for a while, but I don't know how it works over there, because you're in the States, I presume.
Yeah, correct.
But here, I think machining is a restricted trade, so you have to go like apprentice in it and stuff like that. So
really,
yeah, I don't think I'm a licensed auto mechanic. I don't think they would just hire me off the street to supervise a multi-million-dollar project like that.
That's fair. I mean, there's probably not too many companies doing that in the States either. But yeah, that's understandable.
So yeah, that's a little bit of that. I do have a question though that I ask every single guest I have on. Do you mind if I throw you that right now?
Yeah, go for it.
So let's say you got a grant to start the business of your dreams. You have to start a business. It doesn't have to be profitable because you get a massive grant, but you do have to provide a service or a product. What kind of business would you start?
Oh my goodness.
That's a
hard-hitting one. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, but there's no right
prep
or wrong.
Nothing for that one.
Nope, none. But there's no right or wrong answer. So be okay with that. Man. You're fine.
A business. I don't know if I have like a specific I would do this specific field, but I do think kind of like in line with like this website I'm building, like some sort of product in which it would be useful for people to use, not a consumable thing, but some sort of information where people can learn or be a good resource for people.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of the people that I have on here that answer that question, they end up with something that is a net positive for either general society or makers. And so that's kind of like the same area you're going to. You're adding documentation to the world with your projects, which is something
Yeah.
that's very commendable.
That's really interesting, though. Like, just your observation of that from like the maker community, that like most people are like that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a self-selecting group though, because I reach out mostly to content creators. So if you're a content creator, you kind of want to share to start with.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
If you're a maker, you've picked up a lot of your skills probably from other people, whether it be watching them on YouTube or literally working with them, doing stuff with them in person, like whether it be a teacher or a maker space or whatever. So there tends to be a lot of makers who want to either share or give back or both. And so, yeah, I end up with a lot of answers like I want to make a maker space, I want to do this, I want to do that. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, that's understandable. That's cool.
Yeah. So any closing thoughts, like for example, where you want people to go see your stuff, or maybe recommending a video for people to check out on your channel?
I mean, I guess just check out the most recent one that I uploaded, the tiny ESP32 on Paul's project. I mean, that's kind of the most recent thing that I've been doing. So, and stay tuned for the third version of that.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that. I didn't realize that, because you do mention in the video that there is a problem with the RGB LED. And because I didn't see it on your website or anything like that, I assumed it was just, a trial run and you're like, oh, well, done, on to the next one. But it's really nice that you're actually going to clean up the design and do a V3. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, hopefully it'll turn out good.
I forget, are you sponsored by a PCB manufacturer?
No, but I've used, all the major players. They're all PCBWays. I believe you said you were sponsored by. They're great.
Yep, PCBWay. And actually, I have to say my first PCBs I've ever made were from JLC PCB from YouTube advertising. And I mean, sorry, PCBWay, block your ears. There's no difference. I've always got high quality boards. I mean, they've got the manufacturing. Everybody has the manufacturing pretty much down to a T. I just like PCBWay because they support me.
Yeah, well, that's completely understandable. Although I will say, like, I don't know how much you followed Sion. He's had like some weird issues with GLC PCB over the years.
Oh, did he?
We're like, oh yeah, he's had like all sorts of although like, he's probably getting tens of thousands of boards made, so I guess you're probably gonna run into some stuff here and there. But yeah, he's had some weird stuff over the years. And I will say I had I did have like some. This is like a weird tangent, I guess, but
yeah, go ahead.
I did have some panels that I had bought from JLC PCB were like, so I had like two buttons on there and they were both side by side. And out of all the panels, I probably had like 50 panels made, and like two of the buttons were like offset, like very noticeably. And I'm like, how does that happen?
That is weird. Maybe the acetates they used, there was like bleeding or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird.
What's cool about PCBWay, not to advertise them too much there because they're already getting an ad spot in the middle of this podcast, but let's say you order 10 boards. I don't work in panels obviously because I'm just a hobbyist, but you order 10 boards. Sometimes you'll get like 13, and if you check the 3 extra ones, sometimes the solder mask has a little bit of a blemish on it or a little missing spot, and so what I like is that instead of taking the PCBs that are quote unquote ruined and throwing them in the trash, they send them to you anyways. So for me, for the YouTube video, I'll use a perfect board, one of the 10. But for my sometimes I order 10 because I really want like 5 or 6 or 7 in different places in my house or to give them away or whatever. And so the blemished ones are still perfectly functional. They just don't look good on YouTube.
Right.
So I'm really glad they do that instead of chucking them in the bin.
What kind of boards do you make?
I make all sorts of boards. I have made simple stuff. Actually, it's all simple stuff compared to the boards you make. But I've made simple stuff like basically a board with like 4 fuse holders and a whole bunch of screw terminals, so I can add fuses and multiple terminals, so I can feed multiple circuits off one power feed. And I've made things where I have push buttons and an ESP32 and some relays so I can control loads. I mean,
cool.
I make all sorts of things. Nothing fancy, really. Just mostly fun stuff and messing around, because that's kind of how I got started. I was making circuits on breadboard, and then when I finally decided to take the plunge and buy some boards, it was so cool to take your messy breadboard project and put it in a tiny little board, which is so organized compared to like having the jumper wires all over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people start off that way. I know I did too, where it's like, I had built like some sensors for my wife's plants, and I had all these sensors. They weren't in a breadboard, but I had them wired together, and I had like crammed them into a 3D printing case. I'm like, there's got to be a way to make this much cleaner. And it's kind of the same thing. You could build like a daughter board or something like that to snap onto a microcontroller, and it looks way cleaner. And it's a lot of fun.
So how about this for the end of the podcast? Can you give any bit of advice to someone, making their first couple boards? Like what is something you learned throughout making boards that you wish you knew when you got started?
I don't necessarily knew that I wish, but I will say just build something, and when it comes in, just expect it not to work, and that's completely fine. That happens to everybody. As long as you're learning along the way, that's what's important, and it can be a pretty fun and rewarding adventure for sure.
Yeah, that's valid. I mean, famously, Dave Jones says, I hope you build a circuit, and I hope it doesn't work, because then you get to diagnose it.
Exactly. There's a lot of diagnosing going on sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, how many times I've had to add a bodge because I need to make the video like now. I just solder a wire.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I fix it, and then people get the fixed version. So there are actually still a bunch of PCBs that I've seen that people have downloaded and hopefully had made, and they have the only working ones. I don't have the working ones. I have to bodge all mine.
Right, yeah. You never made the final version yourself?
No.
Yep.
Because why would I, right? I'm okay with the bodge wire, but it's just unacceptable for others.
Exactly.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Yeah,
thanks for having me on.
I hope everyone goes to check out your website, which is smartbdesigns.com, and the DevBoard DB, which is DevBoardDB, name's right on the tin.com. Did you have to buy that domain from someone, or
no? It was available.
Oh, look at you!
And
you lucked out.
Shockingly, I also have ESP32 DB and Arduino DB. So if you go to either of those, it'll take you to the same place in case you can't remember.
There we go.
Board.
I just buy useless URLs like metergauntlet.com. It doesn't go anywhere.
I have some of those too. It's all right.
And yeah, so I will link your YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@PaulPrice.
Yep.
And yeah, hopefully people go and check out your video. And if you do check out Paul's video, I'd love for you guys to leave a comment saying that you came from the podcast, because it's one thing to, have the podcast running all the way to the end. And it's another thing to, have proof of that. So let us know.
Yeah.
All right. And so thank you so much, Paul. And hopefully we're going to catch the viewers on your channel in the comments.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening, everyone.